always the exciting part. It's our main tree here, and I'm going to bang in some strong burnt umber with a touch of ultramarine coming in as well. Also going to use a little bit of sepia. No, it's very similar to umber, but it's got slightly different characteristics. And also in there is going to be a touch of turquoise. Quite an unusual one, but it's quite a strong one, this turquoise, and that'll go in there as well. So still, I'm using on a 12 now, a 12 round. Just lifting off. So you to get those branches, you know, people can find trees really difficult to do sometimes, and the real key is to remember that, you know, start thick from the base and work up and go thin. That's the general rule. If you study trees really carefully, that's not always the case, actually. There are some strange things in nature that kind of defy what we might perceive as being true. But this pressing on with the brush, I mean, pushing quite hard, and then as you flick up, lifting off in the pressure. It takes a while to develop that skill, but the more you practice, obviously, the easier it gets. It's kind of dragging up as you pull along. So that's the start, and it's looking a bit stumpy at the moment, but we're going to bring in some finer twiggery in a while. It's always best to mix up different strengths of mix branches. Don't have them all the same mix, because if you have them the same tone, it's going to be pretty boring. So I know, you know, I use a lot of silhouettes for my paintings, but in this case that would be kind of boring. We need to get a little bit of texture and variety in there. So it really is just tickling the brush across the surface, the push and the lift. Push and lift, that's a good way of describing the technique for creating branches. Push and lift. Notice I haven't really gone back in too much to things. I will be dropping in some water as well, because that's always useful to blur things around. For me, it's important to make sure that you've got all kinds of blurred edges, lost and found edges, sharper edges, wet into wet, mixed with dry patches of dry brush stroke, big shapes, small shapes. Just mixing the whole thing up. That's what creates the impact, the dynamic. If everything's the same size, it can become quite tedious and quite boring. Also, you have to, you know, learn to simplify and just focus in on that one focal point and build everything around it. Which is what I've done with this painting. It's just focus on this main tree, a misty day, and that's it. You're kind of telling a tale, telling a story. I'm not sure if I'm going to put those figures in at the moment, though. I'll think about that as we go along. Just touching in some of this finer twiggery, using the same size brush as 12 there. Very, very light touches. Bringing that big branch in across there. So it's all developing nicely at the moment. So I'm going to focus on painting the finer twiggery now. Move the camera back a little bit so we can get hopefully a better view, and we can also now see the tree that I'm painting. these end branches, just teasing these out, gently putting them in. Moved on to a and finally the fine brushwork. It's really, again, on these I could have left it, but this part was blurred, and I just wanted to sharpen it, just so it brings the tree forward really and defines the distance and the foreground. So I'm just bringing in some drier brush in here, sharper paint, liquid paint. This is Ultramarine, and a touch of burnt umber. The brush is a number 4. Again, it's a synthetic, this one. I was just stroking the paper. That's better. Pushes it back. There we go. A flick of dry brush. Touch more work on the ends of the twiggery. More dry brush. And as I said earlier, it's I guess it's knowing when to stop. The late great Rowland Hilder, if you look at much of his twiggery work, there's a lot going on in his trees. You know, so I know some artists will say, oh, you don't want to overstate things, but sometimes it just depends the effect you're trying to create. It's all about the feel of the time. I want to make sure that those sort of grey branches are pushed back, so I'm just bringing across some finer work here just to push those greyer branches back.